Hello, my beautiful grief growers, and welcome to another Facebook Live Thursday. As promised on my Instagram story, I am wearing my new Golden Girls sweatshirt. It says, "I'm ready, take me Hurricane 91," and this is a sweatshirt that Sophia actually wore in the 6th or the 7th season of the Golden Girls. It was in 1991, and I found this months and months ago and had a very dear friend send it to me this week as a gift, so I'm so thrilled because, as all of you know from the very first Fun One episode of Coming Back that we did, The Golden Girls is my all-time favorite TV show, so I'm so stoked to be wearing something that appeared on their show. Not actually this sweatshirt, but something that mirrors something very close. So, been in a very good mood, in a very good space today. So today on Facebook Live Thursday, I want to talk about the pressure, both internal that we put on ourselves and external that we receive from the outside world to get over our grief, to grow from our grief, to find positivity or light or a good message within our grief. And this is really hard, and it's very, very real. A lot of people say, "Oh, I'm not putting that kind of pressure on you. I'm just asking you how you are and how you're dealing with it." Or, "I'm not putting that kind of pressure on myself. I'm just really tired of being in this place and I want to be somewhere different already." But there is this invisible societal and internal pressure that we put on ourselves to do something or to get benefit from or to be beyond our grief, so we can look back at it and say, "I have learned from this. This taught me something. This inspired me. This made me do X, Y, or Z. I fulfilled my dreams of, X, Y, or Z because this happened to me in my life." And we're inundated as a society with stories, with movies, with books, with pictures, with, portraits of people who have learned and have grown and have progressed beyond in their losses to a place where they've started businesses or they started charities or they learned something about themselves and it turned their whole life around. And these things are admirable and they're true. There are even stories like the kinds of stories that I share on my podcast on Coming Back. So there is value in this type of story and in having this crappy shitstorm thing happen and then redemption afterwards. But there's also, in hearing a lot of these stories and in looking at your own life, especially when you're grieving, there's this pressure to be like, when am I going to get there? When is that going to happen for me? When is that going to be possible? And especially when you're in the middle of grief, it doesn't feel possible. It doesn't feel like you can get to that place, and it doesn't feel like you're ever going to get to that place, and it doesn't feel like it's even within the scope of possibility for you. And and I guess what I want to tell you today is that that's normal. That's perfect. That's true. That's real. That's human. Like, I was on a coaching call with one of my friends today, and I told her, I said, nobody's good at grief. Nobody's good at grieving. People are good at being in touch with their feelings and staying present, but grief is not something that any of us are really good at, like inherently good at. And it's frustrating when we're grieving to look around and see all of these pictures of people who appear to be good at grief and feeling like we're not good at grief ourselves. So yeah, that's what's coming up a lot for me this week, this pressure of when am I going to learn from this? When am I going to grow from this? When is this going to change my life in the ways that it has changed so many other people's lives that I see in the news or hear about on this podcast, or even in my friends? Sometimes a lot of our friends seem to handle grief and tragedy and things that go wrong really, really well. And today on Facebook Live Thursday and on the podcast as well, which you can find a link to above or below, I never know, you can listen to just this assurance and this knowledge that it's not supposed to feel like growth. You're not supposed to try to be growing in the aftermath of your grief. If you are and you can see it, that's great. But I could not see it in my own story. I could not see that I was making progress while I was making progress. It was only a year out, 2 years out, 3 years out now that I am even starting to break into the small pockets of growth and kind of revelations and lessons I was learning from that, which is why I'm talking about it now. When I'm in the midst of grief, I can't talk about it. I can't, and that's not to say that I bottled up and keep it all inside, but I'm not in a place to talk about it in a way where I can tell people that I've grown from it, that I see something positive in it, that it taught me how to love, that it taught me how to be better, that, you know, I was inspired by it. It just doesn't happen because it doesn't feel like growth when we're in it. And I'm sure a lot of this is really surprising and really frustrating to hear from somebody whose mantra and tagline for my website, my podcast, and everything that I do is even through grief we are growing. But that is a firmly held belief for me, that even when we don't see it, and even when we're not trying, and even when it looks like things are always going to be like they are right now in the midst of our pain, we are still growing through that. We just can't see it. We just have to have faith that we are continuing to grow through it, even if we're not actively and intentionally and purposefully moving from a space of growth. Because grief feels a lot like backsliding. Grief feels a lot like taking 2 steps back, or failing, or struggling, or floundering, or just trying to make it through each day. It doesn't feel like growth. But then you get some time, which time does not heal all. That's a wonky thing with grief. But time and perspective and support of others and this loving, focused attention on your grief, kind of looking back at it, a month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, what can you do now that you didn't do then? A year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 10 years. What can you do now that you couldn't do then? How did that help you grow? You got to give yourself this permission to not grow in the midst of your grief, but to know that growth is happening. And then just have faith that you're going to be able to see it later. And it's so hard to have faith when we're in the midst of grieving. And I know that maybe this isn't the message that you want to hear today, is that it won't feel like you're growing when you're grieving, but that's what I have for you. That's what's been coming up for me a lot lately. That's been a lot of the content and questions that I've been receiving lately, is when will it feel like something is better, or something is different, or something has changed me in a good or positive way. And the answer right now is not while you're grieving, not in the immediate aftermath of it. You're just not, you can't see it yet. And maybe other people can see it. Maybe you have friends, family who can help you get perspective. Maybe. But even then, the faith and the growth and being able to tell stories on the 6 o'clock news about how this grief totally transformed your life, it doesn't come till later. It doesn't come till later. So this invisible pressure that's on you from the outside and on you internally to learn from this, to grow from this, to try harder, to get over it, to get past it, to make something inspiring out of it, just ease up. Just ease up. Take that off your shoulders there. Take that out of your head. Just take it out of your body, and know that wherever you are right now, you are growing. You are in a place where you're growing, because we're always growing. We're born when we're born, and we continue to grow until we die. That's how being a human here on the planet works. So I just wanted to provide you some reassurance and some love and some knowledge that you're growing, even if it doesn't feel like you're growing. You are, even if you're not actively trying or focused towards it or producing results that you can see and measure. You are growing through your grief. And yeah, that's just what I have for you this week. You can listen to more about this in a little more succinct and scripted fashion in this week's podcast, which also features one of my all-time favorite Instagram artists. Her name is Catherine Rains. We're talking to her about her battle with breast cancer and divorce and being pulled away from her art for an extended period of time, which is really painful when you're a creative soul. And then also on the podcast this week, I'm talking a little bit about how to deal with and bring up death and grief with parents who are getting older. Things like legal issues, things like physical ability or inability, and things like the emotional aspects of identity, just being a different person as an older adult than you were as a middle-aged adult or even a young adult, and kind of coming to grips with the losses that we all face across the course of our lifetimes when we get older. So there's lots of good stuff on the podcast this week. As always, I'm so grateful that you joined me on this Facebook Live broadcast. If you have any thoughts about the internal or external pressure that you're facing to make something of your grief, I would love to hear your comments below, and I will see you next week.